What's up? I'm super pumped to be back. Um, let's see. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about, well, the ball rollback. I personally think that it's not a good move. I think, okay, so I think that basically overall, um, it's not really going to do what it's intended to do, which is you're trying to basically handicap, I guess, the top end of the field from a speed standpoint. So, golf, probably there's like this big amount of pushback from golf courses that are tour played all the time. And they're like, WTF, we can't keep adding yards. And quite frankly, even when they do add, they get it up to 8,000 yards or whatever, it's not necessarily this big deterrent or scores aren't super low. Like, look at Valspar, right? There was a par five that was 600 yards, but guys are still putting it in front. Like, what made those scores lower than the players? Because which I said, I think that the players' scores were way too low. Like Scotty Scheffler and the top guys, like they obviously had this great, amazing, incredible round, but the bottom line is the scores were too low. Like, I don't think that's something that basically is almost a major that you should get real deep into double digits. That should be like 10, 11 under maybe. And then you have the Valspar right after, and the scores are what you would think for the players. Now, yes, the field strength isn't there, but you still had plenty of top tier players, and the scores are not going that low. So, like, what is the difference? I don't know. I don't know the exact yardage on the Valspar. I think that it's probably like 7,500, maybe. But don't forget, like, conditions aren't super firm. Like, you're in Florida, the ball's not flying as far. It's humid, similar to the players. And like, I get it too. On one end, at the players, you have, not a lot of wind. There's wind this past weekend. So that, of course, makes it real hard. And then field size, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, the bottom line is the guys who won, and Scotty Scheffler, for example, who's dominating right now, isn't the longest guy on tour, right? He's not. He hits it far. He's in, low 180s off the driver, but he's not, some of these like up and comers, 190s like normal. And 200 a few years ago was like, oh my God, like 200 mile an hour ball speed was crazy. And now it's like, yeah, it's really impressive, but it's not necessarily like the top anymore. It's like beyond that. So I did a little video on Trey Mullinax, and this guy was like sporting 190 ball speed, like no problem. Back trail foot's not even coming off the ground. It looks like he's casual about it, right? Is he out there winning every single week and like absolutely dominating everybody else? No, absolutely not. Lots of the ultra high end speed guys on the reg, they're not dominating the field. And quite frankly, lots of times when we hear like some newcomer that's coming on tour who's like casual 195 ball speed, are they winning? No. Are we hearing from them or hearing about them 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks later? No, we're not. I'm not saying that we won't, but look at some of like the top tier crazy ball speed, crazy speed guys. They're not in the top 10 and they're not at winning. I'm not saying that 180 ball speed or 182 or 183 isn't. That's like unbelievable, super fast, and they're doing it casual under pressure. But if we're talking about like the top end, it's not the top end, right? So you got Cam Champ, you got Bryson DeChambeau. Like, this is just overall professional golf. You got that guy from South Africa who came on like 2 years ago who's like super tall, super big. Like, I don't even think he made the cut. Trey Mullinax, same thing. Like, some of these like big swing movers, they're not dominating fields. And if the course is longer, it's not meaning or saying like, well, it's definitely an advantage if you can hit it further. But I think it's definitely ultimately circling back to the point of this video. It's the wrong direction. And like no one wants to see people hitting it less far, right? They don't want, like, if you just simply, because right now what the sport has moved into is now golfers are athletes. 20 years ago, Tiger was like one of the few athletes on playing professional golf. Where the other guys, like, they were athletic, but they're not athletes. You're not considering like, geez, well, this guy could be like a wide receiver, like played basketball. Versus now, that's like very much on trend where they're much more athletes and trained and prepare and everything like athletes, and they look like athletes, like they're bigger, etc. Right? So because of the distance, so the equipment and everything has allowed for more distance, but at the same time, that distance has also the people playing the sport have grown into the distance. So they've sort of like matched, right? Where is the art of ball striking, meaning moving it one way or another, has that gone away? Yes, absolutely. Right? Do fans want to see more Bubba Watsons like shaping the ball and doing this, that, and the other? Like, if you're watching on TV, I don't think so. If you're watching it in person, probably not. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. I think that if you're watching a shot shaper on TV, like, the wow factor is very much not there because you're not seeing like, oh, somebody's curving the ball like 30 feet from left to right and dropping it on the pin. Like, you kind of get that on TV, but you're not really getting the full extent of that. But even if you're in person and somebody's doing that, like, are you going there and are you walking away being like, whoa, this guy like curved the ball this far, but he only hit his drive 250 yards. Like, I don't think fans, and here's the thing that I think basically, and I'm sort of neutral on it. I do think from a overall golf perspective, I'm not sure that I think it's unfortunately made a split in golf with LIV and the PGA. Like, LIV has obviously prompted PGA to do things, and the PGA kind of looks like foolish right now, given how against they were at first, and now they're sort of like following some footsteps. I'm not a proponent of LIV. I'm not necessarily a proponent just for the PGA. I do think, and I respect, like, everybody has seen like Will Zalatoris come out and be like, Fred Couples said, well, he turned down 130 million. Lots of people are like, oh, that's the stupidest thing ever. It's like, well, it's not really. Oh, I've also heard like, well, he's brainwashed by the PGA. It's like, what about if he's just a guy who values something different other than money? And he's like, this is what's important to me, and this is what I'm going to go with it, instead of like he's brainwashed or he's an idiot. It's like, I think there's serious respect there because it says, look, I'm valuing the PGA as more prestigious or majors or whatever he's thinking. But what he's not doing, he's not going like, I'm a mercenary and I only care about money. And if you do only care about money, fine, it's a job. Like, you're going there to make money. But like, other people don't necessarily look at it as that. And I don't think he should get, I think it's like big respect, not because it's the PGA, but just like, look, you get this like crazy carrot that's waved in your face that we now know is absolutely not free with all the stipulations that those LIV guys have to do. And it's a massive carrot to say no to, but he's like, hey, look, I can make just as much and or be more fulfilled by not going this direction and sticking with this because I think I can thrive here. So anyway, circling all this back to the ruling change, I think overall it's one of these like top decisions that the USGA makes that's just like the dumbest thing ever, because they often make pretty dumb decisions. And I think their lens and what we might not be seeing is greenskeepers and courses are giving them a bunch of shit on doing stuff to courses because the guys are too good and or they're like embarrassing the course. That could be it, and I understand it from that perspective. On the other side, it's like you're looking at it through this lens of we don't want to lose these core values of golf. But I think these core values are 20 years ago golf, and you got to match what golf is now. And golf is filled with athletes, not guys who play golf that happen to be athletic. And you are now matching that. So, like, the distance piece is like, at first it was the equipment, as I mentioned, and now you're getting guys who are matching what the equipment can do and then all the technology. So of course you're able to optimize it, right? You don't have to turn back the ball, but maybe you don't keep turning it up, or like you put some sort of other limitation. But I think that because, you know, athletes are just getting more athletic, they can train more efficiently, they can look at numbers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like I hate to say this, but like you're fighting progress because like, or you're fighting evolution. And anytime you ever try to fight evolution or you try to fight nature, you lose, period. Like you're not ever going to win that battle. And I think from their lens, what's because basically if you have 10 courses and one course is like, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to add distance. There's going to be a number of other courses that are going to be totally fine to take you on, right? Meaning the PGA Tour, some professional tournament, right? So I think from the lens of the fans and what's been driving golf, which absolutely is fans, here's the question, do we think that purses have increased because the fans and the amount of interest in watching and spectating on golf has increased, decreased, or stayed the same? I would guess at the very least it stayed the same, but most likely it's increased. Otherwise, the sponsors that are coming in and paying more money so that purses are bigger aren't thinking like, yeah, I'm going to get less viewership, but sure, here's more money. No, right? So the fans like the direction of golf. They like the guys being more athletic. It's more in line now with when you're watching, you know, obviously there's not contact and it's a different sport, but like in basketball, those guys are athletes. In football, those guys are athletes. Like in some of these big major sports, these guys are athletes. Golf is matching that. So now this is, instead of a game, it's really becoming a sport where it's like, yeah, this is a sport, like they're athletes in here, right? So the USGA, I think, is looking at it through a selfish lens, being like, hey, we don't want to lose prestige or whatever. I don't even know. When it's like, what exactly are you going to do? If you give somebody a ball that doesn't go as far, you give Rory McIlroy, who incidentally likes this, which is like kind of hilarious. He has seemed to have gone from hero to zero very, very quickly, which is pretty funny. Like ever since Full Swing came out, he kind of like seems to have declined, and then he's like kind of complaining about his driver, and now he's, you know, doing the unpopular opinion, like it'll really suss out, you know, who's really the best. It's like, in point of fact, the USGA looks at Rory McIlroy. Everybody's basically like, this guy is the guy. He's the driver in golf. He's the driver of the golf ball. Given everything, overall, he's the guy. What did he do in the Players? Did he win? No, absolutely not. And the week before that, did he duff it out of the rough because he hit his, you know, enormous drive into the rough and then duffed it out because he couldn't get in position? Yes, he did. So it's like, if we're talking about the guy isn't winning week to week as far as distance and driving, you know, then like, I think you're misguided. It's like, if I personally like when scores are lower, but, you know, I think the better solution is either put pins in harder places, because everybody, when they get to the PGA Tour, everybody's a great ball striker, right? There are variants in distance and off the tee. Yes, of course. But because of efficiency, equipment, et cetera, you can get within range. Now, if you're somebody who rocks 165 ball speed, like on a regular basis on the PGA Tour, like you're in trouble, right? You have to be probably in the low 170s to be basically competitive. But in reality, what we all know, it comes down to one or two things: chipping and putting. Who's making the most putts? So, like, if you want to see really who's the best, which this is where I think the majors highlight, is the pin positions, put them more ridiculous, make, multiple cuts around the green so it's like almost impossible to chip, and or you narrow the fairways, which all of which are much easier on a course. It's not like making a green so fast that you're almost going to lose the green, you know. And we don't have to worry about, well, in the open sometimes the greens are slower, so if there's no weather, like, the guys like go nuts on it. It's because if the weather did roll in and they made the greens as fast as they could, it would almost be unplayable because the wind would be like blowing the ball all around the green. So we're not even talking about that. We're talking about simple things. If you're talking about distance is a problem, guys are hitting it too far and they're shredding courses, and we don't want to alter courses anymore because, we don't want to ruin prestige or whatever. And I'll get to that in a sec. Then this is a simple answer. Like, if make a bigger decision about, pulling driver out or not, or, like, put tee boxes in different places. Like, there's a number of things that you could do. And on the prestige of the course, like, I get it. Like, you don't want to alter course design, but it's kind of like a highway. I used to live in Philadelphia, and there's a road called the Schuylkill 76. The road was dated before it was finished building. Are we going to say, like, if there was an opportunity to expand it, which there's not, but if there was, we shouldn't because we don't want to ruin the prestige of the road when it was built? No, right? Like, it's the same thing with everything else. It's like in football games are coming down to field goals. So what did they do? Did they like do something different to the ball? No, they made the target post more narrow. Or should we see it even more narrow? Sure, because everybody's getting so good and so efficient, and you can calculate and analyze it, et cetera, that, like, people are just getting better and people are matching the skill. It's not that the golf course, a 6,500-yard golf course, or I live in Massachusetts, right? Donald Ross courses are everywhere. And that's like the golf snobs golf course, right? So if you play these and you play a 6,600-yard course or whatever, like, it's fun. But at the pro level, obviously that's too short. Like, the people are just hitting it. You're hitting it too far. So it's like that when Donald Ross built that, he built that in the 20s or the 50s. So he built it for the time, and maybe he thought a little bit further ahead, but the amount of advancement and evolution in golf, not only in equipment, but also in player and who's playing it, where, again, now more athletes are playing it, not just guys who golf who happen to be athletic. You're getting that, like, are we going to be like, well, we don't want to change the course, even though every other factor about golf and the sport has evolved and has progressed or grown in some way, the golf course shouldn't move with it. I think that's the question. And then the ball, I mean, it's kind of silly, I don't think, and I wonder, if we're going to get like a ton of pushback or, I don't know. So anyway, that's sort of like my thought on it. I think, again, in closing, the USGA tends to make really, like, dumb, what seem to be thoughtless decisions. It's like, how much money did they spend on research and development? So I live in a college town, just as an example. This is kind of like analogous to the USGA. There's a big college around here, and there's no parking anywhere. So the town is like full of people who don't want to let go of what it was 50 years ago. But all we're seeing is, like, there's a lot of turnover sometimes in business because there's not parking for people to be able to walk around it. So they don't want to ruin, like, the charm of the town. Meanwhile, they're like right down the street in the center of town, they're building these, like, kind of blocky, ugly high rises that Like, fine, it's housing, but like it doesn't add up. But anyway, somebody sometime came in and was like, we should build a parking garage behind a store with like a big area. Oh, great. Like, makes parking easier. Better yet, it's really good for the business owners because more people can come in and park. But if you know that you can't find a parking space, you are not going to come here because you're like, I'm annoyed. I can't find parking. Why am I going to go there? Parking is always an issue. So anyway, the town spent something like $20,000 or $30,000 to hire consultants, come in, and here's the times that they surveyed: like Monday from 8 to 10, Tuesday from 1 to 3, and like Wednesday from 3 to 5, let's just say, all of which are not prime time, want to come into town, go out to dinner, et cetera, night. So after spending and wasting $20,000, the town goes, oh, we're good. We don't need parking because there are empty parking spaces when they surveyed. This is kind of like the USGA, except on a much bigger level. It's like, how much money are you putting in to basically getting worthless and or non-necessary to pay for analysis when it's like all you have to do is look at like any data set that's public and be like, okay, here are two things. Fans love distance, right? Fans love distance. Number two, that's what they want to see. They don't want to see the ball roll back. They don't want to see the Bellata ball. Remember, I don't know if anybody remembers that, like back in the day where you hit it down here and it goes straight up. It's like super spinny. And just to hold on to golf courses that, you know, either need to evolve or are becoming dated based on the evolution of the game. And most importantly, in that, the evolution of the people who play the game. Because you can't fight that. Like, however many years ago, I think the average height, like hundreds of years ago, the average height of a human was like 5'6". Now I think it's, for at least males, it's like 5'9". So everybody's getting bigger. Everybody's getting stronger. How would we not anticipate something, you know, more velocity, more speed, further? Plus, again, you got the technology to do it. So the hang up is some, you know, people on the board who don't want to let go. If anybody's ever been on a charitable board, we obviously know that. But anyway, that's where I stand. We'll kind of see where it shakes out. I think it's hilarious. Kind of. Sometimes I like to think Rory's like trolling everybody. He's like, oh, it's an unpopular opinion, but I think it's great. It's like, do you? I guess what he's saying is like, I'm going to hit it far either way, and I'm still going to be longer. So I know that I'm probably a better and more superior ball striker than everybody else. So like I might not lose as much distance, but other people that it's really equipment based, it's not skill based, well, they're going to suffer. Maybe that's what he's saying. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. And I'll see you next week.